All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Okay. Before I start, one quick announcement. Scale, another local conference coming up in a few months here. Their call for papers is open currently, so if you're so inclined, feel free to submit a talk for that. I believe it closes sometime next month, so you've got about a month to do that. All right, so our next speaker is Ben Sadeghipour. Ben is a technical account manager at HackerOne by day and a hacker by night. Prior to joining HackerOne, very varied lifestyle. Prior to joining HackerOne, he has helped identify and exploit over 500 security vulnerabilities across hundreds of web and mobile applications for companies such as Yahoo, Airbnb, Snapchat, the U.S. Department of Defense, Yelp, GitHub, and more. He has also invested time in the security community by creating a community of 200 plus active hackers who share ideas and their experience. He's also held a few free workshops to provide tips and teach others about security and web application hacking. Please join me in welcoming Ben Sadeghipour to ShellCon 2017.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. I'm Ben. As mentioned, I work at HackerOne as a technical account manager. At nights, I try to hack a couple of companies here and there. I participate in a lot of bug bounties, mostly to stay sharp with skills, and some extra cash at the end of the night also is nice. But we won't be pitching you guys on what bug bounties are today, and mostly talk about my methodology and some of the things that I've done personally that's made me a couple of bucks. If you're a new pen tester, you might pick up some new tricks. If you have been doing pen tests, some of these could be things that you're already using, and we'll get into it a little bit more. So I'll give you guys an overview of what the talk is. We'll talk about the traditional way of how people are doing recon to find assets and to create a bigger exploitation surface. We'll talk about Amazon Web Services as a part of that, and then we'll move on to search engines, and then we'll talk about abusing GitHub and JavaScript files as well. So why? As I mentioned, you find a bigger attack surface, you find more bugs, you get more money, you have more problems. So brute forcing. Traditionally, with trying to find an attack surface, you run a script. There's a handful of them right here. You can run all of them. You can run a couple of them, depending on your word list. You find subdomains, typical patterns. You find those patterns, you brute force them again. So example, you find a development staging site at site.dev.corporate.com. You go after the corp.site.com and you find everything before that corporate domain. But there's things that have different patterns that are not impossible, but take longer time for you to brute force and find them. So trying to make it easier, we'll get into it as the talk goes on. You can also do Google, just throw in the site, site.com, and then take out all the domains that you already know about, and it will give you new results. So that was a traditional way. For me, it wasn't working out. It was taking a lot of time. It was way too slow. You can't really automate that. It's automation. You can automate it, but it's kind of slow still. You miss some stuff. So why not bank on human errors? Those are easier to find. What do I mean by that? So for Amazon Web Services, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with S3 buckets. You can use Amazon to host your files. You can point one of your domains to the S3 bucket. But if the human error happens and you forget to claim that S3 bucket, someone on the other side, as a hacker, could claim that as your domain is pointing to it and upload whatever they want, phishing attempt, cross-site scripting, whatever they wanted to do. So how do you find them? Traditional way, again, you go to Google, you type in site as s3.amazon.com, because that's where they're hosted. And then in URL, you put the company you're working for, or you're looking for. So example, I'm picking on Uber. I type that in, and it will find a bunch of patterns. And you can also do that on GitHub, and you can also automate it as well. So what I mean by that is, on Google, on Uber, you see there is about 300 and some change results. And on the other side, on GitHub, I'm looking for Trello, which has 14,000 hits on just Amazon AWS.com. So you use those combined together, you already have a big enough attack surface. But what if they're not hosted on Google? What if it's not indexed on Google? What if it's not indexed on GitHub? What if it hasn't been leaked out anywhere else? So we go back to brute forcing those. How do you do that? Is you create a list of subdomains that you already have. It could be a traditional list of 400,000 names, and you add different patterns to it, like product, staging, and development, and you automate it. And as you go, you find more and more. So by that, you create a bash script, You make a list of all those patterns, and you feed it all those subdomains that you already have. You combine them, you run it, and as you run that script, it will tell you which one exists, and it also could check for whether or not they're vulnerable. So Amazon has a CLI. You can copy stuff to your S3 bucket. You can test and see if it's listing items that are on that S3 bucket. And combining that all in one script, you're already automating it. You don't really have to rely on Google. You find those, you can feed it into this as well, but it's saving you a lot of time. All the tools that I'll also be talking about are on my GitHub. You're free to go download them and play around, change them, send them back to me. We'll push them to my GitHub if you want to contribute. But all of these things that I'm going to cover today, they will also be on my GitHub page as well. So what could go wrong? For me as a bug bounty hunter, if I'm blindly looking for these S3 buckets, sometimes somebody could use the name Uber in some random bucket that they don't own, that's not owned by Uber. So there, you're stepping out of scope of the program, whether it's a pen test or a bug bounty. As I mentioned, it could also be a third-party app. It could have the name Uber, but it's probably not operated or owned by Uber. It's just being handled by somebody else. So this could be some of the challenges of going and trying to get creative with your recon process. GitHub. Most developers here, I'm sure you guys all push your codes to GitHub. There's also downfalls to that. What I mean by that is you can find more information about your target. You can find all those development, staging, product environments that are being hidden by someone pushing their code to GitHub. We can find secret keys. Believe me, it happens a lot more than you can think, where people leak their API keys, their passwords, secret keys, and all that good stuff. I've seen LDAP logins before on GitHub. You see different API points that you wouldn't see within your regular workflow. You also understand how the company is naming those domains internally. And that gives you a huge advantage of finding other domains that could possibly not be behind a firewall and you can access them directly. So examples for everything that I've talked about, I wanted to include stuff that I've actually been able to do with it and I have a proven method for it. So for the GitHub part, I found a Jenkins instance on GitHub by just looking Jenkins and the website's name. It ended up not having authentication in front of it at all. And then guess what I had? I had all the secret keys and all the build info. I found FTP credentials for a very big company that it's in the crowdsourced space. And they ended up giving me a full FTP access where I could upload a shell and do whatever I liked to. The third one was just internal GitHub credentials, where it gave me access to their internal build services, where they were hosting all their builds for their mobile apps and stuff like that. And some of the patterns that I've used to find those is just company name and then putting the keywords that I want, password, API key. You'll be amazed of all this stuff you find. You'll be amazed of how many people are leaking those private keys on GitHub. You can also automate a lot of this work. People have written tools like GitRub, GetAllSecret, TruffleHug, GetSecret, whatever it is. There's a bunch of tools you can do, but I like to personally do a manual approach. That's because if I'm looking for site.com and I put the word password, I may not find the password that I wanted to. Maybe the password parameter is blank, but there's a chance that there is some URLs in there that I wouldn't have found if I didn't skim through the file personally myself. So these tools are looking for keywords and just getting whatever parameter is, whatever the value of that parameter is, and giving it back to you versus analyzing the entire file, seeing if there is any URLs, any internal other stuff. The password might be there, but it could be named differently with the parameters that you're providing. So doing a manual work, it may take a lot more time, but you get a lot more out of it while you're doing all this by yourself. So I don't like to, I'm all for automation besides this part of it. So there's other things that could go wrong. I've seen people that have worked at the company 3 years ago, the credential no longer work, or if it works, it's something personal that they were using, it doesn't matter anymore. Old keys that have expired, somebody else has found them, but no one's deleted them. You also, again, find third-party apps. We don't know who's handling it, what traffic's going through it, and so on. There's been times that I found people's Firefox profiles on GitHub would have all their searches. There's been times you can find little things that always matter. So search engines. By search engines, I don't mean the typical Yahoo and Google search engines. I want to focus more on Census, Shodan, and Archive.org. Or it could be kind of a search engine. And then my favorite one is SearchSpotter. The three, Census, Shodan, and SearchSpotter, kind of do the similar thing. They all pretty much scan the entire web pull certificates or pull data from those IP addresses that they're scanning. On Shodan, you can find a ton of random stuff, a ton of IoTs, modems, routers, whatever. I like to use Shodan or Census and all these other services to find internal IP addresses that it's not accessible by domain, but if you go to the IP address by itself, you can actually load whatever is being hosted on that page. So let's talk about Census. Census, this is one of the searches that actually worked for me. I put the company's name, and I just put the word internal. Boom, it found an internal dev environment that I wouldn't have found by just doing the brute force approach. You can just put in the keyword of the website and nothing else, or you can spend a lot of time like I do and read the documentation, figure out what the syntax is for Census, come up with a search query that works for you. This one's been doing me a lot of, it's been helpful, and it's found me a lot of good stuff that I wouldn't have found. As you can see, there is snapchat-payment-gateway.snapchat.com. Something like that, I probably wouldn't find it with my generic word list that I host when I do my recon. So example, I actually published this about a month or two ago when I found a Jenkins instance with Snapchat that was accessible within the development environment. So when you go to it, there was an authentication on there, but for some reason my Gmail worked, got me in. And then it gave me Shell. I could actually get that to dump files that I wanted. Unfortunately, this was a very brand new environment. Somebody before me, 3 months before me, actually found the product environment from the same company, and he got $15K for it. Same approach, 3 months time difference, $10,000 difference. Shodan, kind of the same approach. Shodan lets you do a lot of filterings, and one of the reasons I use it, you can either look for a port. So if you're looking for Tomcat instances, you can use the 8443 and give it the product for Tomcat. If you want to just look for if you want to look for the org, so example, if Yahoo owns an entire IP space, if you put in org equals Yahoo, it will pull all the IP addresses that are being owned by Yahoo. So it does a lot of filtering. There is a really good book that the founder of Shodan actually published himself. It's $5, but the $5 is a very good investment if you actually spend the time to understand how these queries are working, how you can filter them out, and how you can find the data. So let's talk about examples. I got, again, RabbitMQ had access to the internal servers. So I initially found a content management system, I want to call it, so I don't disclose the name, that had a lot of log files in it. It was on a different port, so it was maybe port 8081, for example. Interesting. So let's go ahead and search the same domain and put the port number 15672, which is RabbitMQ. I found the open port, going through all the logs from the other content management system. I found credentials, which got access into the RabbitMQ instance. Again, another Jenkins instance that similar to the one that I showed earlier. Same thing. You go on Shodan, you type in organization, or you can use the hostname actually for this one. I put hostname equals thecompany-name.com. Cool, there's a Jenkins instance just sitting there out in the open. And most of the time, not sure why, but they don't require authentication. So that's easy money for people that are trying to find vulnerabilities on your infrastructure. Going a little too fast. SearchSpotter is another one. They have a very good API, but the API is very, very messy. It gives you a lot of data that you don't need, but you can always automate that. It's all in JSON. You can always feed it to a third-party tool. You can automate all that work and feed it to different tools. So let's talk about that a little bit. Again, great API. So what I'm doing is I have an alias. I'm actually making all these things that I've built that requires commands. I build them into a bash alias for myself, so I don't have to think of what the syntax was, how to write it, or what the how to get the JSON format to look a little bit prettier on the right side. So again, I'm curling to SearchSpotter. I'm feeding it to JQ. It's making it nice and easy for me, and it gives me the list on the right. And some of these ones, like cc.corp, no way I would have found it. I'm not looking for that kind of wording in my with my brute force. The other one that I'm not really a big nmap kind of person. I don't really do port scanning. I have Shodan. I don't really have to spend a lot of time. But some of these things, you can't find them on Shodan for some reason. You can also feed it to Nmap. You can feed it to Nmap. So same thing as the one above. I'm just giving it a pipe with Nmap, feeding it to Nmap, and doing some port scanning. I also have another one that is not up here, but I've also gone as far as adding a directory brute force. So I spend $5 and get a server somewhere that's hosted for me. I put this bash alias in there. I run it. I run the same script. It gets me all these domains, dumps it into a file. The next command takes the file, feed it to my directory brute forcer, and then it starts looking for all these different folders that exist on that. So you can find Git repositories on there. You can find admin panels. You can find folders that that you want to find as fast as you can. So for me, if I have 100 domains that I want to brute force, I can just feed that through the server that I'm hosting elsewhere. I'll go grab dinner, do whatever, grab a couple of drinks, come back in a couple of hours. All the scans are done appropriately. I go through all of them, look at the response headers, look at how big the files are, and analyze them, and then take that attack surface further. JavaScript files. JavaScript files have been something that I have been personally focused on a lot more lately. Airbnb has been the biggest target. They've been very nice to me, and they've let me experiment with a lot of their applications. I don't see nobody from Airbnb here, but Nate and Max have been very nice to let me actually talk about these publicly. I've also written about these on my blog. You can check them out online. But both of those vulnerabilities were pretty important to them. Well, the first one was I could pretty much see anybody's notifications sent to my phone. The second one was SSRF, where it gave me access to the internal network. But how did I find them? I didn't find them by my usual clicking around, seeing what burp is giving me. Some of these endpoints aren't even, the developers don't know it exists. Because different teams push different code, different files are being worked with by other people on the team. So how can I find all of these in one place and go through them? This way, sorry. This is another tool. It's called JS Parser. And what it does is it's kind of a search engine. What you can do is you can give it a list of JavaScript files. I mean, if you give it a 50 megabyte file, it's not going to do well, but it might take a while. But if you give it 20, 30 decent-sized JavaScript files, it would go through every single line, find all the endpoints that are making some sort of a get, post, put request, highlight it for you, and then you can check them out. So for Airbnb, this worked out pretty well because I was already saving all the JavaScript files in the notepad, and I know they're constantly pushing new features, right? So how do I monitor that without going to their website and clicking on it every day? You run one of these. I think I run one of these every week on Airbnb now. When they give me pretty much every endpoint, I diff the current one with the past one. I see what's different, what's been added to it, and then I ping them and I ask them, do you guys know this exists? And if they don't, that's a good thing for me. That means their pen test team or the QA team has looked at it. I go ahead and look at it, and that would be the result of it. Both of those were found by JS Parser. The hardest part is to actually fuzz and find those parameters, but Airbnb loves giving really a lot of content and a lot of errors as you go through the API. So if you give them the wrong parameter, they're like, oh, no, that's not what you want. These are the parameters that you could use, and then you give the parameter the wrong input. It's like, no, you only have these 4 options. Which one do you want to use? So it works with me. It works with them. They're happy with it. So why not build a tool around it? So how do you find all these JavaScript files? Archive.org, time machine, people call it. There's websites from early 2000, maybe a little bit earlier. I don't go that far, but you can go ahead and find all these JavaScript files that were hosted 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Actually, there's a script for it also someone wrote. I don't have that on my slides, but you pretty much put the site in. Let's just click on Airbnb. You go to the time machine. You click on 5 years ago. You click on it. It has all the content that was on the site 5 years ago, hosted on archive.org. You look at the source, you pull the JavaScript files, you go back to JS Parser, and most of the times, those endpoints that were used 5 years ago were just forgotten about. Someone did this project, worked on it, and then just left the files behind. So archive.org, it's not really a search engine, but it comes in very handy. So for people that are doing development, I always tell them, if you're not using an endpoint, if it's old, please delete it, or it's going to cost you a lot of money if you're running a bug bounty. And if you're not, it's going to cost you a lot more headache and money than just bug bounties. And the reason why I do the JS parser thing is, besides the endpoints in JavaScript, I've seen people have a bad habit of putting hard-coded credentials. No idea why, but I've seen people actually type in the AWS keys in the JavaScript files. I've seen people put in credentials for some reason. You can grab those. You can also find internal subdomains and maybe making a call to another domain. Snapchat doesn't use Snapchat.com, for example, for a lot of their API calls, right? So if you go pull out some of the JavaScript files from from Snapchat and you put them into JS parser, it's going to give you all these different endpoints. But at the same time, if you look a little bit deeper, you will see that these random subdomains and domains that are hosted somewhere really weird on a Google subdomain, maybe on Google Cloud, or it could be on Snapchat's internal domains that you could never find unless you're actually going through the JavaScript files. And again, I do that because it finds me more bugs, gives me more money, gives me more problems. Before I do go away, we are doing a giveaway at our HackerOne booth. I have the first person to raise their hand and answer this question would win a Phantom 3 drone. So first person, again, that raises their hand and give me the right answer could come up and grab it. HackerOne has just recently partnered up with a big company for a project that we launched today. Does anyone know what company that is? Yes. So we're doing bug bounties for Google. If you're good at mobile hacking, I know Brett did a talk today about finding bugs on mobile apps. If you find a decent bug, if you find a bug that could affect the actual mobile application and the workflow, not only the company would pay you, if you submit it to Google itself, they would give you an extra $1,000 as a part of a partnership with HackerOne. So you can go ahead and go on hackerone.com and figure out where to submit them. I know I went a little too fast, but I'd be more than happy to take some questions as well. Yes?
You mentioned that you like automation in some cases and manual work in some cases. When would you decide, how would you decide which way to go? Do you try automation first and you see something that you dig in? Or do you dig in manually first and if you see something lazy stuff and then you just want to automate it? Or what's your approach?
So a lot of things that I did at first, it was all manual. I did a lot of manual work and I realized some of these things that I'm doing could be written in one line of bash. But I've had the data to see which ones are good to automate and which ones, if you're looking for certain things within a file, it's a lot of things. But if you're looking for a specific piece of info, automation always works. And I don't mean by automation, I write almost everything in bash besides the bigger projects that we published. 1 or 2 lines of bash always helps. And most of the time, it's going to be in my alias. If you actually go on my GitHub, I have I think I call it recon profile, I believe. They have all these different aliases that I've created. It could be as easy as doing a whois on an IP. I can just look up who the IP address belongs to. But typing curl, subdomain, and then the domain and the IP takes a long time versus saying IP info, IP, and it gives you the information.
I'm just curious, with the recon you do, is it basically just kind of your instinct that tells you out of all the data that came back, these things look like places I should focus?
So for most of the automation, for example, when I do automation on the S3 bucket, so when it says testing, it doesn't give me an error, more than likely it doesn't exist. But if it's something that exists, you don't have access, it'll give you the error that prints for you. If it exists and you can actually exploit it, it will try and exploit it for you. Again, these are just things that it's built into AWS's CLI, but it's not an AWS fault. It's not on Amazon's fault. It's whoever's configuring these S3 buckets or these instances that are making a mistake. So doing that, it just prints out the error. It just tries the exact command that the CLI is supposed to do and gives the result for it. So I try to make sure that the biggest thing that I focus on is the response header, what it comes back, and how big the file is. If it's just every file is coming as 200 with the same amount of info on it, that means it's false positive. But if I'm getting 200s and like some of them have 800, some is like 900, 1,000, then I know there's different files, and that's actually accurate.
Have you scanned Microsoft 365 at all?
I have not. I know Microsoft does offer a bug bounty program, but I have not looked at them at all. Go Going once, twice.
Could you share your GitHub site again?
If you go to Nahamsek would be on Twitter, GitHub, any other social media you want to get a hold of me, it would be that. Also, my email for Gmail is the same as that.
All right, round of applause for Ben.
A little bit shorter than I thought.
Just a reminder, everyone, if you liked what you saw, please let us know what you thought. Grab one of these cards in the back and fill it out for the talks you've seen today, and let us know. They're on the table in the back of the room, and there's a little box you can put them in. Thank you.